Welcome to Talent Talks, the podcast where your host, Dan Maisey, dives into hiring's ins and outs. Our goal is to reveal how to attract top talent. Through interviews with leaders in sports, media and entertainment, we explore job search and recruitment trends, offer interview tips and strategies to differentiate yourself and uncover their hiring insights. Whether you're prepping for an interview or interested in hiring trends, Talent Talks is your essential resource. Let's dive in. I'm delighted to be joined on the pod today by Helen Rowbotham, who is currently making significant strides as the CEO of Access Sport, where she champions the development of healthy, accessible and inclusive sporting opportunities with impactful societal benefits. With 25 years of experience in the sports sector, Helen has consistently tackled complex challenges, rallied diverse teams and stakeholders and delivered high-integrity outcomes. Her role extends to serving as a non-executive director and trustee at the British Paralympic Association, where she chairs the sports committee and contributes to international relations and social impact committees. Helen's extensive background includes pivotal roles at British Rowing, where she directed community and strategic initiatives aimed at enhancing diversity and inclusion within the sport. Her vast experience across the sports spectrum, from strategic planning and event management to creating positive community impact through sport, means we have a huge amount to discuss today, and I can't wait to get into her thoughts on all things talent and recruitment. So let's get into it. Helen, welcome to Talent Talks. How are you?
I'm very well. Great to be here with you today, Dan.
Good, thanks for coming. Right, let's start straight away, shall we? We ask this to each of our guests that come on, as you know. What are your experiences of hiring and being hired, and do you have any lessons learned?
There's a lot in there, Dan.
It's a big first question.
So experiences of hiring. Well, I'll focus on where I am now. So as a charity, we are growing rapidly and we've actually doubled in size over the last 2 years, and I'll be recruiting another 10 posts. So we've gone from sort of 20 staff to over 40 now. We'll have 50 by the end of this financial year. So a lot of recruitment going on. And as with most organisations, we're adapting, reviewing our processes, really always thinking about how we can find the candidates that are the best fit for our jobs and the opportunities we have available. And so much of it is about finding those unique individuals who both have the skill sets, but also the values that align with us as an organisation, and really understanding them. I think that's one of the most challenging elements of recruitment. It is all about that fit. That doesn't mean we want lots of identical people. We want people who connect with the different audiences, communities we work with, but connecting with those people and really understanding how they fit with how we work as a charity, our values and our culture is a challenge. Flipping it onto the other side, my experience of being recruited and actually kind of being contacted by recruiters and lots of opportunities that kind of get presented to you is kind of a real mixed bag, actually. I think, there's some amazing opportunities that come up in the sector. I think the biggest challenge for me across, things you get approached about and lots of different recruiters is I feel like they don't really understand you as a person. And often there's the starting point is a conversation that says, we're looking for someone who ticks all these boxes. We think you're that person. And then actually, as you go through the process, you realize that that's not what they want. They want something completely different. And they've not necessarily really understood from their client what that fit is. And I think if you really kind of get to the nub of the type of person that's the right fit, the real skill sets that are really important, not just, I'm going to tick all the boxes because this is a safe option, then I think recruitment would look very different.
Yeah, there is a huge amount in that answer. So let's get straight into it there. And we'll do the easy bit first in terms of what you said at the end there. And I think from my side, it's about understanding not necessarily what the experience of the person is, but also where of the candidate is, but actually more where they want to go and how and the values of those experiences can add to the new organisation. But equally, you need to understand recruiters, hiring managers, HR need to understand the role itself, but not necessarily what the role looks like right now. It's how that role looks in 6 to 12 to 18 to 24 months time, especially at a senior level, as you look to develop the businesses that you're going into. And that's why a longer term talent strategy is something that I find it is growing importance in the sports industry, but not necessarily has always been that important in the sports industry in terms of how does the talent actually fit into the wider organizational KPIs or OKRs or whatever you want to call them, the objectives of the organization. Where does the organization need to get to and what to get to, and how does talent actually fit into that? And then taking a step back from that, how do the people that we need to bring in help us to achieve those goals? I think by understanding all of that, even if you're a third-party recruiter, by understanding all of that, you can then find somebody that's going to be a much better fit, and the experiences and the people you're then going to contact are ultimately going to be more appropriate, in my opinion, obviously. You mentioned in the answer there as well around the doubling size in 2 years, you're hiring even more now, and you're going to get to more by the end of the year. What challenges are you facing at the moment when you are trying to hire at such a speed?
Well, it's hugely time consuming, and we're a charity. We are not using recruiters on a general basis for most of our roles, and a lot are I wouldn't necessarily use the word junior, but kind of a few years in, middle management type roles, if you want to use that terminology. And I guess the challenge is always, right, how do we reach? This is the basics, isn't it? How do we reach the people we want? And of course, in the sports sectors, there's your pretty standard websites and so on that everybody uses. How do you stand out from the crowd on those? I think, actually, it's almost outside of the recruitment process, just trying through all of our comms. Very much our comms activity isn't just about selling what we do and supporting the community support. It is about, raising the profile of us, trying to attract the best people. All of that we factor into our comms. It's really important. So we need people to want to work for us, but we need to be able to reach them. And then in terms of, filtering through applicants, you still get so many applications that haven't been tailored to the role, which I just find amazing that people waste their time. But there's still an awful lot of that, and that you get a lot of that through certain websites. They're out there as well, inevitably. But then it's a question of really trying to get an understanding of that person. We have moved and we've been trialing sort of more initial application forms rather than cover letters, so that at least we can get that early sense of what somebody's about, why they're applying, rather than the identikit cover letter type approach. We're sort of trialing and testing alternative approaches all the time. But as I said before, it's all about, yes, I need people with certain skill sets, but actually what I'm really interested in is where, as you said, where they want to get to, and do they have that energy and drive and ambition to really put in what's needed to get there, and the creativity. And then you've got the sort of third key point for us is around them really understanding and being able to work with communities that we support, which is predominantly disadvantaged and disabled children and young people, but equally the clubs, coaches, volunteers that we essentially support to support those beneficiaries. And I have to, you have to know that they're authentic, that they can have that lived experience is really important to us. We're less and less focused on qualifications. Yes, they kind of play a part and can be very impressive, some individuals, but actually that can be countered with lived experience. And, we're really open to looking for people coming from different sectors as well. But you do have to demonstrate why, I've always something I always thought, if you want a job, start the job. And if someone wants to work in sport, then if they're not volunteering at a club, or they're not kind of getting out there and get some basic qualifications, or they're not sort of getting work experience, then do you really want this job? So there's so many factors that come into play. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you mentioned in there around the kind of personalization of applications as well. And just to touch on that very quickly, I think this is a bit of a broken record for some of the conversations that I've had, but I think the LinkedIn Easy Apply button has been to the detriment of the effort that candidates need to make in order to actually apply for a role, because it's so easy to just apply and go, right, I click that. And then organizations have got 200, 300, 400, 500 applicants to go through, half of which don't even really want the role, but it's just they thought it looks interesting and they've just whacked it in just in case. And actually, I think there needs to be a greater emphasis from candidates to put a bit more work into what they're doing. And it kind of comes back into what you said around creativity as well. How can they showcase their creativity through a what is fairly traditional process still at the moment in terms of CV, cover letter, or applicant form, however it's done. Sport and its periphery are kind of integrally creative industries, really. And so how can we look at other creative industries and learn from them in terms of whether it's use of video, whether it's use of portfolio side of things? And that comes in again to the kind of educational side of things as well, is how can we take this over here and extrapolate it to really kind of make a difference into this application? And you mentioned about how you stand out and how Access Sport stands out from the crowd in terms of when you're trying to hire, but it's both ways. How's the candidate stand out to you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. We did sort of trial. I think we still put in a number of our job description ads that go out that, people can put in as an alternative to a cover letter or the application form type approach. Actually, you can submit a video or an audio recording. I mean, when we got an audio recording that was 10 minutes long once, that's not what we meant. You're going to do an audio, keep it a couple of minutes and bring it to life, or something on video to show your creativity. But don't do it if you don't know how to do it. So it's great to have those options. But interestingly, very few people have chosen to use that. I kind of sense that that's because people don't know what good looks like for that. There aren't many examples out there. So, it's a bit of a, do you want to take that risk, or do you want to just go down the traditional approach? But, you referred there to, the 500 applications online via, click options. And it's hugely time consuming. And it's time consuming both for the recruiter, but also, actually, if you get through that first stage, if it's not a job you want, and as you will know, any job you're going for and you care about and want, you have to put a huge amount of energy into those roles. Because if you don't, it comes across straight away at interview. It's very obvious. So I don't think, looking for a role and to move, it's not something any of us can take lightly, because whilst we'd like it to be an easy process, you have to put that energy into it. Otherwise, the recruiter will just not really get to understand you and your connection to the role, because you won't have put the effort in to be able to get that across.
Yeah, I think fundamentally, it's an emotional journey for a candidate looking for a new role. More emotional, the more invested in an opportunity you get. And it's, I suppose, there's a question, isn't it? Is it a bit of protectionism of, well, if I prepare too much and I really, really get into the kind of nub of what the company are and the role entails, and I really want this and I don't get it, am I going to be even more disappointed? Whereas if I just kind of go in without thinking about it as much, which I'm not saying is the right way in the slightest, I'm just kind of spitballing a little bit here, but does that play a part?
I do get what you're saying, though. You're completely right. It is an emotional journey for many people. Okay, maybe not everybody feels that way, but particularly if you're very passionate about your career and you want to progress and develop, then, these are not decisions you take lightly. And actually, you're normally in a pretty busy job already, and you're trying to fit this in alongside. Inevitably, the attention and focus you put on those recruitment, you can easily take the ball off your sort of day-to-day role. So it's always that balancing act, isn't it? And you kind of almost want to put the right level of energy in at the right stage. So there's a certain amount of energy at application or, CV stage, that next level of energy, and trying to get that balance right can be a challenge as well. And I think we've also got to recognize that it comes back to something I said earlier about really understanding recruiters, really understanding the type of person. This is increasingly important as it kind of higher level roles, the type of person and the skill sets that are critical for the future piece, as you said, as opposed to now. And rather than trying to tick all the boxes, what's really important and what are the drivers? And I do think that you can very easily go through these processes and you get to the end and you think, that role was never right for me. There were several opportunities there to get a better understanding of that. Why didn't it happen? And you put a lot of effort in. And actually, at the other end, you go, I was never the right candidate. Because it's a two-way thing, isn't it? It has to be a two-way fit. Yeah. And that I do find, particularly when you're looking for more senior level roles, is hugely challenging because it's just such a commitment.
Yeah, I actually think it's across the board, not necessarily just senior, but it's expressed in different ways in the sense that if I think the more senior you get, the more likely you are to know whether or not a role is the right one for you as you go through the process, and as you realize that actually, the role might be good, but the organization isn't, or vice versa. Whereas at a junior level, you tend to, or a more junior level, I should say, that tends to not come out until you actually start the role and you start really understanding as you go in. And that's where you get the challenge of, okay, well, it's not right for me, but it's not going to be right for the organization. And it's very obvious from both. And one of the questions that comes up quite regularly in this podcast is how you deal with that when you have hired somebody that has come in and isn't right for the role. And kind of touch on that in a second. But I think it tends to be that even if it's not recognised immediately from the employee, it is recognised as soon as they go into a role that is right for them, because they then realise, actually, that wasn't right for me. But so let's go back to that original question, Helen. Have you at any point hired people that haven't been necessarily right for the role or the organisation, and how have you dealt with that?
Yes, I would say I have. And it's a funny one because often it's those people where at interview stage there may have been that little bit of doubt, but you kind of like, no, there were enough benefits to outweigh. And I think sometimes you kind of know where you're taking a risk, or not necessarily a risk, but you're not quite sure how this will work out. And sometimes that's going to be the case, right? Because at the end of the day, you're recruiting, there's only a set pool of people who apply, you've got to choose the best candidate you can. Sometimes you have to go back to the drawing board and start the process again and sort of look at it, because you obviously don't want to make the wrong decisions either. Better not to recruit than to recruit the wrong person, to be quite frank. Because again, then you're on a kind of another whole journey of, if somebody's not the right fit, then, genuinely, you want to try to support them. If you can see that there's a load of stuff that they're great at, but there's a few gaps, how can you support them, work together, being really open? I think it's really challenging in this day and age with employment law and everything else. It's like, how do you be open about some of those challenges and things that aren't working, whilst also, not damaging the relationship or having problems in terms of kind of employment law side of things. And, you want to treat people fairly as well. Nobody's trying to do a bad job. Everyone wants to have a job they enjoy and working well. So I think, really trying to be open, but being really human about that process. Whereas, sometimes when you speak to HR professionals, this is the process, this is how you should, deal with this situation. And it can feel very sort of mechanized and sort of, not very human, quite frank.
On the human element, and just taking a bit of a pivot to slightly talk to what you said in your very first answer when you're talking about it, it's quite clear, not only from your current role at Access, but also previously, that the values and the cultural side of things are something that are very, very important. And I really liked one of the things you said around unique individuals, but non-identical individuals. How do you, whilst you're hiring for a set values and set culture, how do you make sure that you do bring in people that are different enough to have a difference of opinion and to promote positive conflict? Not yes people, but people that can actually go, is this the right way of doing things?
Yeah, I mean, clearly it's challenging because essentially you open up an advert, you wait and see who you get interest from, right? But that's the sort of standard approach. But also, I very much encourage the team that I have to, if we see impressive people at events or so on, then why not speak to them and ask them? I think you'd be a great fit for our organisation. We've actually just had a new team member join our kind of first step role, a community coordinator, who exactly that, one of my colleagues met at a community event where she was running a youth panel and just said, you should contact us, and it'd be a great fit for what we're doing. And then also we've had, I mentioned earlier that actually putting less onus on qualifications and more interpersonal skills and passion, because for a lot of our work, where it's kind of very much engaging with communities and leaders in local communities, if you don't get that fit right, then it just doesn't work. Whereas a lot of the skills and so on, the kind of factual stuff and process stuff, you can learn. So, we've had people who join us who, probably they don't have the standard degrees and they've got a very different background and so on. And that's great because actually they bring slightly different skill sets sometimes to other colleagues, but work really well together because we've kind of got a really collaborative culture in the organisation. Just more lived experience. We particularly want people who have lived experience of socioeconomic disadvantage or disability. We've got a number of team members, for example, who have siblings or parents and family members who have had different challenges. And actually that's really important because it allows them to just empathise so much better with people we work with. So I think it's just going back to your question about just thinking differently about the type of people who work really well in our organisation. We know we've got that kind of process system side. We can teach people those kind of core process elements, financial management and so on at a basic level. We can teach that stuff. What is difficult to teach is how to be brilliant with people, how to energize a group of young people in a room, how to run a young leaders program with people who do not want to be in that room. We have a number of coaches who work for us, and I was at a session in Manchester this week, and one of the teachers, it was a group from a pupil referral unit, and they were doing an hour of BMXing and an hour of young leadership training. And the teacher said to me that the two coaches, or two team members from our side who are running that session, are the best of any of the kind of youth workers, community groups they work with in terms of understanding those young people and making them feel that they belong and are able to engage in those activities. And that to me is like, yes, that's success, because that's what it's all about. Actually, the fact that they're not great at filling in their monitoring and evaluation forms or collecting all the finance data, we can deal with that. But if you can't get that human connection bit right in the work that we do, then we won't be successful. So really thinking about what's important and then training up in those other areas. But yeah, I think, we're just having to be much more flexible and just thinking about what's really important rather than the sort of classic, have they got a 2-1?
Yeah, I think that's a really important part of it, because I think that sometimes the sports industry has a bit of an ego in a sense that people think that you can't, unless you've worked in it, or unless you work in it currently, you can't learn it. And there are so many different parts of it that you can. We're not doctors. We don't need to have a literal degree to do our job. And so, there are elements of it that of course help, but ultimately the nuance and the experience is the bits that can be learned. And what that then enables you to do when you don't focus on that is open up to a huge swathe of people that are outside that industry norm as it is at the moment. The diversity and inclusion side of things, diversity of thought, but actually core EDI, which is somewhat lacking in our industry anyway, can be hugely increased because you're then looking outside the box as well.
Yeah. And look, I don't want to sort of be negative about all the amazing degree courses out there. I was at Loughborough University for an event last night, and that's where I went. And what an amazing start I had to my career as a result of going to Loughborough and being part of that whole environment. We actually also have a university placement program here at Access Sport. We've currently got 4 university placement students, often some from Bath University, Loughborough University, Brunel, others as well, people studying sports courses of various different types. And what's been great is that off the back of them, we've been able to recruit. We've literally just offered a role to somebody who was a placement student with us a couple of years ago. So, that's fantastic. That's kind of really giving people that stepping stone into the industry and to understand the roles that are there and available. But we need people with all those different skill sets. And that's what creates a great team, right? Because we all bring different experiences into the organisation. And I think if you kind of have a culture that's really kind of open to understanding the different input that people can provide, whilst of course still doing the basics, then that's great. And neurodiversity, that's a big focus of our work as well. And actually people who understand that from their own experience, lived experience, is really important as well, and becoming increasingly important with lots of the partners that we work with as well. So yeah, not just sort of, when I talk about disability as one of our key focus areas, that is really quite broad: deaf, disabled, neurodivergent. And actually we want people from different backgrounds to come and work with us who can input to our work, help us develop our programs. So yeah, we are kind of really focused on that. But I would say we're still not as diverse as a staff body as we would like to be. We've still got some way to go as well. And it kind of feels like we're always sort of like, what can we do next?
But I think that's the key question, isn't it? Is as long as you're asking yourself that question and asking about the organisation is asking themselves that question. Sorry, I should say that's the key element, really. Helen, I am very conscious of your time, and we are getting to the point now where we are almost at the end, and I want to make sure that we've got enough time to ask our 3 quick fire questions. So I'm going to get straight into them. What has been your most frustrating thing about recruitment?
It has to be people who don't tailor their responses. That is my main bugbear.
Good. Excellent. I like that. You don't have to name them, but you are also more than welcome to. Who has been your best hire and why?
On this one, I really shouldn't probably name somebody, but I am going to name our Director of Fundraising and Comms here at Access Sport, who joined us about 6 months after I joined. But the reason, as well as being able to do the core job, outside of his work, he is a community athletics coach and does loads of youth volunteering. And I think for us, it's amazing how many people in our team do additional volunteering outside of their role because they get it, and it kind of means that our work means so much to them. And that was not quick fire, sorry.
I won't lie, Helen. That's probably still the most quickfire answer to that question I think we've ever had. So these are named quickfire questions, but very rarely tend to be them. And then final thing from me, what is the one thing you would change about the recruitment world?
I think it's about understanding your candidates and really getting to understand what they bring to an organisation. And equally, that's a two-way thing, understanding the candidates and understanding what's really needed in a role, because then you can be so much more targeted and focused in your recruitment process. I think that's the thing that wastes so much time, lack of understanding of people.
Yeah, I love that. And that is a perfect way to finish. So look, Helen, thank you very much. Thanks for taking the time. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And thanks again for coming on Talent Talks.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan.